Victor Caldwell walked into the lavish hotel bar, his mind weighed down by the pressure of the day's business meetings. The polished marble floors reflected the soft, ambient lighting that bathed the space, and the hum of conversations mingled with the clinking of glasses. He could feel the usual stress of his corporate empire creeping back into his shoulders, but there was something about this hotel, the Ritz-Carlton in Washington, D.C., that had a way of making him feel both at ease and somewhat disconnected from the outside world. The bar was dimly lit, with a few solitary figures scattered across the seats, each wrapped in their own bubble of thoughts. He ordered a whiskey on the rocks, letting the familiar burn relax him as he leaned back in his chair, observing the people around him. But his attention was soon diverted. The soft sound of piano music drifted into the bar from the hotel's lobby. It wasn't the usual background music played by a recorded playlist or a live band trying too hard to impress. No, this was something different. It was melodic, emotional, and far too intimate to be part of the hotel's usual atmosphere. Victor found himself turning his head instinctively, drawn to the source of the music. Through the open doors leading into the lobby, he could see a young woman sitting at the grand piano. Her fingers moved gracefully over the keys, playing a hauntingly beautiful melody that seemed to tug at something deep within him. Victor couldn't place it at first, but there was something familiar about the music. He'd heard that song before. It reminded him of something from his youth, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The soft, rhythmic melody filled the room, laced with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't a particularly sentimental man, but something about this young pianist's playing brought a rare lump to his throat. He leaned forward in his seat, his drink forgotten as he focused on the girl at the piano. She wasn't the typical hotel lounge performer. She had a rawness to her, an authenticity that resonated deeply. Her eyes were closed as she played, lost in the music as if the world around her didn't exist. Her name was Lily Thompson, though Victor had no way of knowing that. She had been playing piano since she was a child, each note a testament to the years of struggle she'd endured to be here. Lily had come to D.C. with nothing but a dream of making it as a composer and a pianist. But the reality of the industry had quickly set in, and after months of unpaid gigs and barely scraping by, she had found herself playing in hotel lobbies, hoping that someone, anyone, would take notice. She had yet to achieve any major breakthrough, but she was determined. Music was her escape, her salvation, and this little bar was the only place where she could pour her heart out without the world judging her. Victor, on the other hand, was a man who had everything: wealth, power, influence, but he often felt a deep sense of emptiness in his personal life. At 52, he had achieved everything he had set out to accomplish in the business world, but there was something missing. His wife, Claire, had left him years ago, taking their young daughter with her. The marriage had been a casualty of his own ambition, and though he never spoke about it, he regretted losing both of them. He hadn't seen his daughter in over a decade, and the thought of her was a source of quiet sorrow. Victor often wondered what had become of her. Was she living a life like his, successful but devoid of any true joy? Or had she turned out different, the product of the life Claire had built for her alone? His reflection on the past was interrupted when the music stopped. Lily's fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before she slowly withdrew her hands. She opened her eyes, looking slightly disoriented, as if she had just come back from a faraway place. Victor stood up without thinking, compelled by a sudden urge to speak to her, to know more about the person who had stirred something inside him. He walked over to the lobby, his heart still echoing with the melody he had just heard. Lily was gathering her things when Victor approached her. She looked up at him, slightly startled by the man who had come to stand so close to her. There was an air of confidence about him, but his eyes betrayed a certain vulnerability that intrigued her. She had seen many wealthy men in this hotel, their eyes glinting with the confidence that came from a lifetime of success, but there was something different about him. He wasn't just another patron. "That was beautiful," Victor said, his voice low but sincere. "The music, it's rare to hear something like that in a place like this." Lily smiled, a modest curve of her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I'm just doing my best to make a living. Not much of a crowd tonight, I guess." Victor took a step closer, his interest piqued. "You've got real talent," he said. "Tell me who wrote that piece?" Lily hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "It's something I've been working on. I don't know if it's any good, but it means something to me." She glanced at the piano, almost as if she were embarrassed by her own vulnerability. Victor looked at her, considering her words. There was a depth in her music that matched the depth in her eyes, a certain sadness, a story untold. He found himself captivated by her, and for the first time in years he wanted to know more about someone beyond the surface. "It's good," he said, his voice firm now. "You should keep at it. There's something there. Something important." Lily looked at him for a moment, wondering what a man like him, dressed in an expensive suit and exuding an air of authority, would know about her struggles. But there was a sincerity in his gaze that made her hesitate before brushing him off. Instead she nodded. "Thanks. That means a lot, really." Victor stood there for a moment longer, then almost instinctively offered, "If you're ever looking for an opportunity, don't hesitate to reach out. I might know a few people who can help." Lily wasn't sure what to make of his offer. People often said things like that without meaning them. But there was something about the way he spoke, with a sense of genuine interest, that made her believe he wasn't just another empty gesture. She smiled again, this time more warmly. "I'll keep that in mind." Victor turned to leave, his mind still lingering on the young pianist. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her than met the eye, something that felt almost familiar. He had no idea then, but in the coming days he would find out just how closely their lives were intertwined. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The days following their brief encounter at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel had been strange for both Victor Caldwell and Lily Thompson. For Victor, it was a time of reflection, a pause in his otherwise relentless schedule. The memory of the young pianist lingered in his mind, her music weaving its way through his thoughts at odd moments during his hectic meetings and late-night business calls. He had been to that bar countless times before, but it was as if something had shifted that night, something subtle yet undeniable. He couldn't get her out of his head. It wasn't just the way she played the piano, or even the melancholy beauty of the melody she performed, but something deeper. There was a rawness in her music that spoke to him in a way that he hadn't felt in years. Her quiet humility and the way she held herself captivated him, and for the first time in a long while, Victor felt drawn to someone in a way that wasn't tied to his business or social status. For Lily, the night had been like any other. She had played at the hotel bar, hoping for a few tips and the faint possibility of someone recognizing her talent. But when Victor Caldwell had spoken to her, it had been different. There was a sincerity in his voice that felt genuine, and his compliment had felt like more than just a polite gesture. In the crowded world of performance gigs, most people offered empty praise, their words hollow and fleeting. But there was something in his eyes, something deeper, that made her believe he actually meant it. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, days later, she couldn't stop thinking about their brief conversation. Maybe it was his presence, or perhaps it was the feeling that he saw something in her that she didn't even see in herself. But as the days went on, she found herself playing that same song again and again, as if the music had taken on new meaning. The following week, Victor found himself back at the Ritz-Carlton. He wasn't sure why he was there, but he knew that something about that night had unsettled him. The idea of a young woman struggling to make a name for herself had struck a chord with him. He wasn't one to get involved in the personal lives of others, especially not someone like Lily, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. The idea of offering her a chance, of helping her achieve something greater, had become an obsession. Maybe it was a way for him to make amends for all the mistakes he'd made in his own life. After all, what was the point of having everything if you couldn't share it with others? Or, perhaps more selfishly, what was the point if you couldn't even make peace with your own past? When he entered the hotel bar this time, the atmosphere was quieter than usual. The typical after-work crowd was nowhere to be seen, and only a handful of people occupied the space, nursing their drinks and engaged in quiet conversations. But the unmistakable sound of piano music filled the air. Victor's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time he felt something more than curiosity. He stepped closer to the lobby, and there she was, Lily, sitting at the piano, her fingers dancing across the keys with a quiet intensity. The melody was soft, more reflective than the piece she had played the week before, and it struck Victor with an almost painful sense of nostalgia. He stood there for a moment, lost in the music, before he stepped forward, his heart racing as he approached her. Lily didn't see him at first, lost in her own world as she played. But when she finished the song, she looked up and saw Victor standing there, his expression unreadable. She smiled a little awkwardly. "I didn't expect anyone to be here," she said, almost apologetically. "It's a slow night." Victor took a step closer, his eyes searching her face. "You're good," he said, his voice low. "You really are. The music, it feels personal. It's not just something you play, it's something you live." Lily didn't know how to respond. She had always been self-conscious about her music, wondering if anyone truly understood it. Most people who heard her play didn't seem to get it. They only cared about the surface, how well she played, how technically perfect it was. But Victor's words seemed to reach deeper, as if he could feel the soul of the music rather than just hear the notes. "Thanks," she said softly, unable to hide the hint of vulnerability in her voice. "It's been a long time since anyone said something like that." Victor stepped closer, taking a seat across from her at one of the small tables near the piano. His expression softened. "I mean it," he said, his voice sincere. "I know talent when I see it. You've got something rare." Lily wasn't sure if he was just being kind, or if he genuinely meant what he was saying. She had heard it all before, the empty compliments from people who didn't know what it meant to struggle for your craft, to pour your heart into something and get nothing in return. But there was something about Victor. Something in the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, that made her wonder if he wasn't just another rich man playing the role of the benevolent benefactor. After a moment of silence, she asked, "What's it that you do, if you don't mind me asking?" Victor hesitated for a brief moment, but then smiled as if the question didn't matter. "I'm in business," he said simply. "Real estate, investments, the usual. But it's not really what I'm here for." He paused, his gaze drifting back to the piano. "I just wanted to say, if you ever need help or a way to get your music out there, let me know. I know people who could give you the right connections. You've got talent. You shouldn't have to struggle like this." Lily looked at him, taken aback. She wasn't sure if she should accept his offer, or if she was just caught up in the moment. But there was something about the way he spoke that made her feel as though this was more than just an offer to help. It felt like a lifeline, a rare opportunity. Yet, a part of her couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it was all too good to be true. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "It's hard to trust people who promise things. Especially when you've had nothing but disappointments." Victor nodded, understanding the hesitation in her voice. "I get it," he said softly. "I've been there. But you deserve better. You deserve a chance." Lily met his gaze, her eyes searching his face for any hint of insincerity. But she saw nothing but honesty in his expression, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The days that followed were filled with a strange mixture of anticipation and doubt for both Lily and Victor. For Victor, the encounter with the young pianist had shifted something inside him. He couldn't explain it, but it was as if her music had pierced through his thick armor, uncovering a part of himself he hadn't acknowledged in years. Every day he found himself thinking about her music, and about the life she was leading. She deserved more, he could feel that in the pit of his stomach. But what could he do? The world he lived in was so different from hers, so removed from the struggles she faced every day. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to help her, to offer her something more than the chance to play at a hotel bar night after night. For Lily, the days were a bit more complicated. She had received Victor's offer with skepticism, as she had every similar offer in the past. People in the business world always seemed to have a hidden agenda, a way of spinning everything into a deal that benefited them in the end. The idea of trusting Victor, a successful businessman with more money than she could ever imagine, seemed foolish to her. Yet, a small part of her felt that maybe he was different. She had seen something in his eyes that night, a kind of vulnerability, a flicker of something real beneath the polished exterior of a man who had everything. But then again, wasn't that how all the rich ones seemed? They looked for something, some feeling, something they couldn't quite grasp, and Lily feared that she might end up being another one of those fleeting distractions. It wasn't long before the opportunity Victor had offered came knocking on her door. It was a Wednesday afternoon when she received a call from a number she didn't recognize. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but something made her answer. "Hello," she said, her voice tentative. "Lily Thompson?" came the voice on the other end, deep and confident, unmistakably Victor's. "Yes, this is she," Lily replied, her pulse quickening without knowing why. "I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. It's Victor Caldwell. I'm the one you met at the Ritz-Carlton a few days ago. I wanted to follow up on our conversation." Lily's stomach tightened. She hadn't expected him to actually reach out. I didn't think you'd be serious about that offer," she confessed, her words coming out almost too quickly. "I mean, it's not like people usually mean what they say in situations like that." "I understand your hesitation," Victor replied, his voice steady. "But I meant every word. I know a few people in the industry, people who could give you the platform you deserve. There's an opportunity coming up next week, a gala at the Hilton in New York. I think it would be a perfect chance for you to showcase your talent. If you're interested, I can arrange everything." Lily was taken aback. New York? A gala? Sounded too good to be true. Her fingers tightened around the phone as her mind raced. A chance to perform at such a prestigious event, with the possibility of recognition? It was everything she had dreamed of and yet, everything she had been too afraid to hope for. I don't know, she stammered, feeling the weight of the decision press down on her. I don't want to get my hopes up. I've been disappointed so many times before. I'm just not sure I can trust anyone anymore. Victor's voice softened as if he understood her reluctance. Lily, I get it. I've been where you are. But this isn't about empty promises. I'm not offering you something that's going to go away in a week or two. This is a chance to build something, to do something that matters. You've got a gift and you shouldn't hide it any longer. Lily fell silent, considering his words. Could she really take the risk? Could she allow herself to believe that someone was genuinely offering her a chance, without expecting anything in return? She thought about the long hours she had spent playing in bars, waiting for someone to notice, to offer her something more than just another gig. The thought of performing at a high-profile event, of having people who mattered hear her music, sent a thrill through her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she might be on the brink of something greater. Okay, she said finally, her voice steady but uncertain. I'll do it. I'll take the chance. Victor's tone brightened. Great. I'll have my assistant send over the details. Just get ready, Lily. This is your moment. Lily hung up the phone, her head spinning. She had made a decision, one that could change everything for her. But doubts lingered, whispering in the back of her mind. What if this was just another false hope? What if, by the end of it, she was left standing alone, with nothing but disappointment? Still, the chance to perform at the gala was too big to ignore. It was a step forward, a potential turning point in her life. Over the next few days, the whirlwind began. She received the details for the event, where she needed to be, when to rehearse, and what songs to prepare. It was everything she had always dreamed of, and yet, the fear of failure gnawed at her. She was no stranger to rejection, no stranger to being overlooked. But the thought of letting this opportunity slip away was even more terrifying. What if she let down the one person who had shown genuine interest in her talent? What if she failed in front of all those people, those important people Victor had promised would be there? The night before the gala, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her small apartment, the sounds of the city outside muffled by the walls. Her fingers brushed across the piano keys in the dark, the familiar comfort of the instrument offering a sense of relief. Music had always been her refuge, her way of expressing what words could never capture. As her fingers moved over the ivory keys, she allowed herself to breathe, to let go of the fear that had been holding her captive. Tomorrow she would take the stage, and for the first time she would play for more than just a few people in a hotel bar. She would play for herself, for the future she had always dreamed of. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The morning of the gala arrived, and Lily stood in front of her small bathroom mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman she barely recognized. The dress she had picked out for the occasion, a simple yet elegant black gown, clung to her slender frame. She had never worn something like this before, especially not for an event of this magnitude. Her dark brown hair, usually pulled into a messy bun, was styled in soft waves that framed her face, and her makeup, though subtle, highlighted her features in a way she had never imagined she could look. She looked poised, polished, and yet, inside, she felt like an imposter. How could she, someone who had spent years playing at dive bars hoping for a break, possibly belong in a place like this? Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the dress, staring at herself in disbelief. This was it. The moment that could change everything. The chance to be seen, to be heard, to make her mark in a world that had always seemed just out of reach. But the fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough, kept pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She wasn't sure if it was excitement or dread that made her heart race. The gala was being held at the luxurious Plaza Hotel in New York City, a place that seemed to exist in a different realm altogether. Lily had been to New York before, but never like this. Never as part of something grand. She was just a small-town girl from Long Island, used to the hum of ordinary life, never imagining she'd be surrounded by the elite of the city's high society. Victor had arranged everything: her transport to the hotel, the timing for the performance, even a brief rehearsal session before the event began. Lily had tried to keep calm, telling herself she was just another musician getting an opportunity. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just any opportunity. This was her moment. By the time she arrived at the plaza, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky streaked with vibrant colors. The lights of the city seemed to pulse with energy, and the sound of honking taxis and distant chatter filled the air. She had never felt so out of place and yet so drawn to the city at the same time. As she stepped out of the car, A valet opened the door for her, and for a brief moment she felt the weight of her nerves lift. Maybe, just maybe, she could pull this off. The lobby of the plaza was just as magnificent as she had imagined. Gleaming chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a warm glow over the marble floors. Everywhere she looked, impeccably dressed people were mingling, laughing, and shaking hands. It felt like the world was operating on a level she couldn't fully comprehend, like she had stepped into a different version of reality. Victor had arranged for her to meet with his assistant, a well-groomed man named Thomas, who guided her through the hotel to a private area where the musicians were gathering. "Miss Thompson, I presume?" Thomas asked with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, as if he were sizing her up. "Mr. Caldwell is expecting you." Lily nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, I'm Lily." "Right this way," Thomas gestured, leading her down a long hallway lined with portraits of wealthy patrons, their faces frozen in time. She could feel her pulse quicken as they passed door after door, each one seeming to lead to a world she had never imagined herself a part of. When they reached the designated room, Lily was ushered in, where she was introduced to the other musicians who would be performing at the gala. There was a string quartet, a harpist, and a few other pianists, all of them well-dressed and exuding the kind of polished professionalism Lily had always admired from afar. They exchanged pleasantries, and she could tell they were sizing her up as much as she was trying to do the same to them. The environment was far from the cozy bar setting she was used to. It was crisp, clean, and filled with the hum of expectations. After a brief warm-up session, Victor walked into the room. His presence immediately commanded attention. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, his posture impeccable. He smiled at Lily when he saw her, his blue eyes lighting up with a warmth that instantly made her feel a little more at ease. "You look stunning," he said, his voice low but genuine. "You're going to do great tonight. Just remember, it's about the music." Lily smiled awkwardly, unsure how to respond. "Thank you. I've never done something like this before." Victor gave her a reassuring nod. "That's exactly why I wanted you here. You have something real. It's not about perfection, it's about feeling the music." As the hours passed and the time for her performance drew nearer, Lily found herself pacing in a small backstage area, rehearsing in her mind. The weight of the night was heavy, but there was a quiet, almost meditative calmness in her movements. She wasn't sure if it was the thrill of being surrounded by so much wealth and influence or the sheer pressure of the event, but she found herself lost in the rhythm of her breathing, allowing the tension to dissolve. Finally, the moment arrived. The lights in the main hall dimmed, and the guests began taking their seats. Lily was led onto the stage, her heart thundering in her chest. The grand piano sat at the center of the stage, bathed in soft light. She sat down slowly, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the keys. For a moment she was frozen, looking out at the sea of faces staring back at her. But then she took a deep breath and the familiar sound of the keys filled the air. The notes flowed from her fingertips, one after another, creating a melody that seemed to transcend the space around her. Victor stood at the back of the room, his eyes fixed on her, a look of quiet admiration on his face. He knew this was it, this was the moment he had been waiting for. But what he didn't know was that the music, the melody she played, was more than just a performance. It was a conversation, a bridge between their worlds. It was something deeper, something that would soon lead them to an unexpected revelation, one neither of them could have anticipated. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. As the final note of Lily's performance reverberated through the grand hall of the Plaza Hotel, a hush fell over the room. The sound lingered in the air for a long moment, as if the guests were reluctant to let go of the magic she had woven through her music. For a brief second, Lily sat still at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. She had played the best she could, given everything she had. But the feeling of doubt lingered, gnawing at her as she slowly stood up and turned to face the audience. The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the space, but Lily's focus was elsewhere. She looked at Victor, standing at the back of the room, clapping enthusiastically with a proud smile on his face. But even as the applause grew louder, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. As she made her way off the stage, her legs felt like jelly, and she had to grip the side of the curtain to steady herself. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, but now that the performance was over, all she could feel was a sudden wave of exhaustion. She made her way to the small backstage area where she had left her things, trying to shake off the nerves that still clung to her. Victor soon appeared, his presence always commanding and strong. He offered her a smile, but there was something different in his eyes, a spark of something deeper, something that she couldn't quite place. "Lily, that was amazing," he said, his voice warm, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made her pause. "You have an incredible gift." "Thank you," Lily replied, though her voice faltered a bit. "I don't know. I feel like I could have done better. Like I missed something." "No," he said, stepping closer to her. "You were perfect. It's not about perfection, you know. It's about being true to yourself. And you did that tonight." She nodded, not entirely convinced. But before she could respond, Thomas, Victor's assistant, entered the backstage area with a phone in his hand, his face slightly strained. "Mr. Caldwell, we've received a call," Thomas said. "There's someone here to see you. They say it's urgent." Victor frowned, clearly irritated. "Can't it wait? I'm in the middle of something here." "They're insisting," Thomas replied, his expression apologetic. "I tried to tell them it wasn't a good time, but—" "Fine," Victor said, his voice sharp. He turned to Lily. "I'll be right back. Wait here for a moment." Lily nodded, watching him leave with a sense of unease. She had no idea what was happening, but something about the situation felt off. She hadn't known Victor long, but she had already come to recognize his tendency to become somewhat aloof and distant when things weren't going exactly as planned. She wondered briefly who could be so important that Victor would have to leave so suddenly after a night like tonight. For a few moments, she sat in the quiet backstage area, trying to gather her thoughts. She had poured everything into her performance, her hopes, her fears, her doubts, her dreams, and now that it was over, she felt strangely empty. The applause had been kind, but it hadn't erased the gnawing feeling in her chest. Something was still missing. She was about to get up when she heard a faint noise behind her. Turning around, she was startled to see a woman standing in the doorway watching her. She was tall and elegant, her long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders in soft waves, and she wore a black dress that was as understated as it was sophisticated. The woman's expression was unreadable, her lips set in a tight line. Lily blinked in surprise. "Can I help you?" The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward slowly, her gaze fixed on Lily. There was something about the way she looked at her that made Lily uneasy, as if the woman were searching for something she hadn't quite found yet. "I'm sorry to intrude," the woman said, her voice calm but with a quiet intensity. "But I needed to speak with you." Lily was about to ask what the woman wanted, but before she could say anything, the woman spoke again. "You don't know me," she said, her eyes softening. "But I know you. Your name is Lily Thompson, isn't it?" Lily's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" The woman hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "My name is Claire Caldwell," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Victor's wife." Lily's mind raced, her thoughts colliding in a frenzy of confusion. Victor's wife? She hadn't known he was married, at least not until now. The suddenness of the revelation left her speechless, and she struggled to find the right words. "Why are you here?" Lily finally managed to ask, her voice trembling slightly. Claire stepped closer, her gaze never leaving Lily's face. "I'm here because of you, Lily," she said softly. "You don't know this, but you and Victor, you share something more than just music." Lily's heart began to race again, the words barely making sense. She took a step back, feeling the sudden weight of the situation press down on her. What was this woman talking about? What did she mean by, "You and Victor share something more than just music"? "Victor hasn't told you, has he?" Claire continued, her voice trembling. "He's your father." The words hit Lily like a punch to the gut. She stared at Claire, her mind struggling to comprehend what she had just heard. Father? She had never known her father, never had any inkling of his identity, and now this woman was telling her that the man she had just performed for, Victor Caldwell, was her father? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. "I know this is a lot to take in," Claire said, her voice gentle but firm. "But it's the truth. And it's time you knew." Lily stood there, frozen in disbelief. She had spent her whole life wondering about the father she had never known, and now here she was, face to face with the unimaginable truth. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Lily's world felt as though it had tilted on its axis, and everything around her seemed to blur, as if the reality she had known her entire life was suddenly slipping away. She stood there, motionless, in that quiet backstage corner of the Plaza Hotel, the soft murmur of the hotel lobby spilling through the thick walls, but the words Claire had just spoken rang louder in her ears than any noise could ever drown out. Victor Caldwell was her father. She could barely wrap her mind around it. The man she had admired from afar, whose presence she had felt so strongly during her performances, the one who had been her mentor, had now turned out to be someone far more significant in her life than she ever imagined. Claire's gaze softened as she saw the confusion and shock on Lily's face. She had clearly anticipated this reaction, but that didn't make it any easier to say. "I know this is overwhelming," Claire said, her voice steady but sympathetic. "But you need to understand, Lily, that this has been hidden from you for a reason. Victor didn't want this. He didn't want you to know." Lily's throat tightened as she tried to speak. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, her breath shallow. "What? Why didn't he tell me?" Her voice came out in a whisper, barely audible to her own ears. "How is this even possible? All these years, why didn't I know?" Claire sighed, taking a step closer to her. "It's a long story and not an easy one. Victor wasn't in a place to be a father when you were born. He made decisions based on his circumstances, decisions he thought were best for you. He thought it would be easier for you not to know the truth, to protect you from the complications of his world." Lily shook her head, feeling the sting of betrayal, yet there was something else, a flicker of hope. Maybe it was the possibility of finally understanding the emptiness she had often felt growing up, the nagging feeling that something was missing, like a piece of her puzzle had never quite fit. "Does he know that you're telling me this?" Lily asked, her voice tight with uncertainty. She knew that if Victor had wanted her to know, he would have told her himself. There was no way he would have kept such a monumental secret if he hadn't had his reasons. Claire hesitated. "He knows I'm here. But he doesn't know I'm telling you this now. He won't be happy about it. But I think it's time, Lily. It's time for you to know the truth. It's time for you to know who you really are." She paused, her eyes reflecting a deep sadness. "Victor, he regrets not being there for you. Every day." Lily closed her eyes, trying to absorb the weight of the words, the reality crashing into her mind like a storm. She had spent so many years wondering about her father, imagining what he might be like. She had created 1,000 different scenarios in her mind, but never once had she imagined something like this. The man she had admired and looked up to for so long, the one who had inspired her musical journey, was not just a mentor. He was the missing piece of her past. "I don't know what to say," Lily whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "How am I supposed to process this? My whole life, everything I've known, has just changed." Claire gave her a sympathetic smile, her expression softening. "I understand. I really do. But you're not alone in this, Lily. We can take this one step at a time. You don't have to face this all at once." Lily nodded slowly, her mind racing, her emotions a mix of confusion, anger, and a strange sense of relief. She had always felt an emptiness, a longing for something she couldn't name. Maybe this was it. Maybe knowing who her father was, knowing that there was a reason for that void, would finally bring her the peace she had been searching for. "I need to see him," Lily said suddenly, her voice firm now, with a newfound determination. "I need to hear it from him. I need to understand why he never told me. Why he kept me in the dark all these years." Claire's eyes softened and she nodded. "I can take you to him. He's in his office not far from here. But, Lily, I need you to be prepared. Victor isn't the same man you think he is. He's changed a lot over the years, and the man you'll meet might not be the father you've imagined." Lily felt a knot form in her stomach. She had no idea what that meant, but she didn't care. She had to see him. She had to confront him, to hear his side of the story, to understand everything. She wasn't going to let this go without answers. Without another word, Claire led her out of the backstage area and through the quiet hallways of the Plaza Hotel. The high ceilings and elegant decor seemed to blur as they passed, Lily's mind consumed by the questions swirling in her head. She had always dreamed of meeting her father, of finally knowing who he was, but this wasn't how she had imagined it. She had expected a reunion filled with joy, maybe even tears, but this felt different. The weight of it all was heavy, and the uncertainty that loomed in the air only added to her anxiety. Claire stopped in front of a door at the far end of the hallway and gave Lily a small, encouraging nod. "He's in there," she said softly. Lily took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew that her life would never be the same after this. She knocked lightly on the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. When the door swung open, there he was, Victor Caldwell. His face was older than she remembered, his once immaculate suit slightly disheveled, but his eyes were still sharp, his presence commanding. He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and something else, something unreadable. Lily didn't know what to say. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, all she could manage was a whisper. "It's true, isn't it? You're my father." Victor stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing as if he couldn't quite find the words. Slowly he nodded. Yes, Lily. I am. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Victor's eyes were filled with an emotion Lily couldn't quite decipher as he stood there, his gaze locked onto hers. The moment felt surreal, the silence between them stretching on, thick with unspoken words. The reality of it all seemed too much to absorb. The man who had been a distant figure in her life, an influential yet mysterious presence, was now standing in front of her as her father. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it had arrived, she was at a loss for how to react. Lily took a step into the room, her movements slow, deliberate. The space was grand yet austere, decorated with a mix of modern and classical elements, reflecting Victor's personality, polished, but with an air of coldness that seemed to match the distance he had kept from her all these years. The heavy scent of leather and mahogany filled the air, and Lily's fingers lightly brushed against the back of the chair where he had been sitting moments before. His office was immaculate, everything in its place, but it felt more like a museum than a home. She turned to face him, her breath caught in her throat. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked, the words coming out sharper than she intended. She felt a wave of frustration building inside her, but there was also a raw, vulnerable edge to her voice. "Why did you let me grow up thinking I was alone in the world, without any clue of who I really was?" Victor's face tightened, the lines around his eyes deepening as though the question had struck a nerve. He didn't speak for a long while, and Lily could feel the weight of the tension hanging in the room. Finally, he exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair as he looked down at the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured, tinged with regret. "Lily, I never wanted to hurt you," he began, his tone heavy with emotion. "The decision to stay away wasn't easy, but it was something I thought I had to do at the time. I didn't think you would be better off with me in your life. There were too many things I couldn't give you, and I couldn't be the father you needed. I made mistakes, and for that I'm sorry." Lily felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent years dreaming of this moment, imagining how it would go, but now that it was here, she didn't know what to do with all the emotions swirling inside her. She had spent so much time wondering about her father, filling the empty space in her heart with assumptions and half-formed fantasies. But now that she was face to face with him, the reality was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. "But you still should have been there," Lily said quietly, her voice tinged with pain. "I spent all those years feeling like I was missing something, like there was this hole in my life. I didn't know why I felt so empty, why nothing ever seemed to make sense. I had no idea it was because I didn't have you." Victor's expression softened as he stepped closer, but Lily instinctively took a step back. He paused, studying her as if trying to find the right words. "I know," he said finally. "I know. And I regret it every day. But back then I was caught up in my own world. My business, my career, everything I thought I had to do to survive. I wasn't in a place to be a father, and I thought it would be easier for you if you didn't know the truth. I thought I was protecting you from the mess of my life." Lily's mind raced as she tried to process his words. She had always wondered about her father, but this wasn't the reunion she had envisioned. She had always imagined a grand meeting, filled with emotion, maybe even a tearful embrace. But instead, she was faced with a man who seemed distant, cold even, despite the words of regret he was offering. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How could you think not telling me was protecting me? I grew up without knowing who you were. I grew up without any answers, without a sense of who I was or where I came from. How could that possibly be better?" Victor looked at her with a sadness in his eyes, his lips pressed into a thin line. "I was wrong," he admitted quietly. "I see that now. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong. I should have been there for you no matter what. I should have been the father you needed." The room fell into a heavy silence, and Lily's mind swirled with questions, each one more painful than the last. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, she stood there, paralyzed by the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. For years, she had imagined this moment, dreamed of a father who would sweep her into his arms and tell her everything would be okay. But now that it was real, she realized it was not that simple. Victor was not the perfect man she had built him up to be in her mind. He was flawed just like everyone else, and the weight of that truth felt crushing. "Why now?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you telling me this now? After all these years, why couldn't you just let me be? Why couldn't you just leave me in the dark, like you always have?" Victor flinched at her words, his eyes closing briefly as though in pain. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost pleading. "I never meant to hurt you. But things have changed. I've changed. I've realized that I can't keep running from my past, from the mistakes I made. I can't keep hiding from you. And I didn't want to die without you knowing the truth. You deserve to know who you are." Lily's heart pounded in her chest. The words he spoke were filled with regret, but there was something else, something deeper. It was as if he was searching for redemption, trying to make up for a lifetime of absence in a single conversation. But Lily couldn't just let him off the hook that easily. She had spent too many years without him to simply forgive him because he asked. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice cracking. "I need time. I need to think about all of this. I can't just accept it all at once." Victor nodded, his face etched with understanding. "I get it. Take all the time you need. But just know that I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." Lily gave a small nod, not sure if she could believe him. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in years she felt like she was standing at the edge of something new. Whether it was a chance at healing or a deeper wound, she couldn't say. But she was ready to find out. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Lily woke up the next morning with a heavy heart. The events of the previous night kept playing over and over in her mind, like a broken record she couldn't stop. She had gone to bed feeling confused, uncertain about her future and what it meant to have Victor in her life. Now, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, the weight of reality settled on her chest. She had always longed for answers, for the truth about who she was and why her father had never been there for her, but now that she had them, she didn't know how to process it all. The hotel room, which had felt like a temporary haven the night before, now felt cold and impersonal. She had chosen the room for its quietness, thinking it would provide the peace she needed to think, but it only amplified the emptiness she felt inside. She had spent so many years fantasizing about this moment, dreaming of a father who would swoop in and fix everything, but now that Victor had finally shown up, it didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt like an enormous, complex puzzle that she had no idea how to solve. She pulled herself out of bed, the soft sheets clinging to her skin as she made her way to the window. The streets of San Francisco were bustling below, the usual morning chaos of cars and people going about their business, oblivious to the storm that raged in her heart. The city was always busy, always moving, and she had always admired its energy. But today it seemed like the world was moving too fast for her to keep up. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking her from her thoughts. She picked it up and saw a message from her mother, Emma. It was short, just 2 words, "How are you?" Emma had never been particularly open with her emotions, and their relationship was a bit strained, to say the least. Lily had always felt that her mother had kept secrets from her, but Emma had always been protective, and there was a certain kind of distance between them that had never fully closed. Lily stared at the message for a moment, her mind racing. She hadn't told Emma about Victor yet. She hadn't even told her that she had met him. The thought of breaking the news to her mother, who had spent years raising her on her own, made Lily's stomach turn. What would she think? How would she react? There was so much at stake, and Lily wasn't sure if she was ready to face her mother's feelings on top of everything else. With a sigh, she typed back, "I'm okay. Just thinking." After sending the message, she stood by the window, her eyes unfocused as she watched the city come to life. She thought about Victor and the conversation they had had. He had apologized, yes, but it felt like an apology wrapped in so much more. It wasn't just about the time he had missed, it was about the guilt he carried, the choices he had made that had led him to this point. But was an apology enough? Could she forgive him for all the years he had been absent from her life? Or was this just another complicated relationship she would have to navigate? She turned away from the window, a sense of determination building inside her. She couldn't keep hiding from the truth. She had to confront it, face it head-on, no matter how difficult it might be. She needed to understand Victor's side of the story, to hear more about why he had made the choices he did. But most importantly, she needed to figure out what role he would play in her life moving forward. Lily took a deep breath and grabbed her purse from the chair. It was time to face the music. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but she knew she couldn't keep running from it. She had to meet Victor again, to talk to him and figure out where they went from here. The hotel lobby was quiet when she walked down, the hum of soft conversations and the clinking of glasses in the restaurant area filling the space. She felt a knot form in her stomach as she approached the reception desk, where the concierge smiled politely at her. "Good morning, miss. Can I help you with anything today?" Lily smiled faintly and shook her head. "No, thank you. I'm just checking out." As the concierge processed her checkout, Lily thought about what she was leaving behind. The hotel had been a temporary place of refuge, a neutral ground where she could process the overwhelming emotions that had taken over her. But now she had to step back into the real world and deal with everything that had been stirred up. She stepped out into the morning light, the city stretching out before her, vibrant and full of possibilities. As she walked toward the street, she felt a sense of resolve forming inside her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive Victor for the years of absence, but she knew she had to find some kind of closure. She had spent too long wondering, too long in the dark. It was time to seek the truth, to ask the questions that had been eating at her for years. If she didn't do this, she would never be able to move forward. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call from Victor. She hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Hello? Lily," Victor's voice came through the phone, steady and calm. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night. I know things are complicated, but I'd like to meet you again. Maybe we can talk more, try to work through this. I don't want to lose you again." Lily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. "I'm not sure what I want right now, Victor," she replied honestly. "But I'm willing to meet with you again. Let's talk." "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I'll make it right, Lily. I promise." Lily hung up, the uncertainty of what would come next hanging in the air. She didn't know where this would lead, but she knew she had to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult the journey. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face it head-on. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The wind was crisp in Chicago as Lily sat alone on a bench near Lake Michigan, watching the water dance under the late afternoon sun. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The past few weeks had been an emotional whirlwind, filled with questions, tears, silence, and long, difficult conversations. After their second meeting in San Francisco, she had traveled with Victor to different cities, New York, Dallas, then here, to see pieces of his life, his businesses, and the world he had built without her. At first, she felt like a stranger walking through the glossy halls of his empire, but slowly, as they talked more and spent more time together, she saw the cracks beneath his polished surface. Victor wasn't just a millionaire with a high-rise office and private jets. He was a man who had made painful decisions in his youth, and one of those decisions had been walking away from Emma and their unborn daughter. Lily had confronted him about it directly. She had wanted the truth, not a sugar-coated excuse. And to his credit, Victor hadn't hidden from it. He admitted he had been scared, of commitment, of responsibility, of a life that didn't fit the ambitious vision he had for himself. He'd convinced himself that walking away was the cleanest solution, that Emma and the baby would be better off without him. But now, watching Lily live and speak and play her music, he realized how wrong he had been. Lily hadn't forgiven him overnight. It took time. She would stare at him sometimes and wonder how a man so successful could have been so weak in the one area that mattered most. But then she'd remember her own mistakes, the lies she had believed about herself growing up, and the judgment softened. One evening, as they sat in a quiet jazz club in Brooklyn where she was invited to perform, Victor stood in the back, his eyes glassy, clapping harder than anyone when she finished her final piece. After the show, he hugged her, not like a fan, not like a business partner, but like a father who had just heard his child speak for the first time. Now, in Chicago, she was here for one last performance before heading home to San Francisco. Victor sat beside her on the bench, wrapped in a wool coat, watching the water with her. There wasn't much left to say. They had spoken about the past, dug through it like archaeologists, and now it was time to bury it. Not to forget it, but to stop letting it define them. Victor reached into his coat and pulled out a small, wrapped box. "I was going to wait until after your concert," he said with a quiet smile, "but I think now is better." Lily looked at the box, hesitated, then took it. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a single tiny charm, a piano. "It's beautiful," she said, touched. "Thank you." He nodded. "Just a reminder that no matter where you go, I'm always going to be your biggest fan. Whether I deserve it or not, I'm here now." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She smiled instead, slipping the bracelet on her wrist. "I can't promise everything will be perfect," she said, "but I can promise I'm willing to try. Maybe we can make something new from here." Victor looked at her and nodded, his voice soft. "That's all I ever wanted." That night, as she performed at a small hall in downtown Chicago, her music felt different. It wasn't about pain or longing anymore. It was about healing, connection, and hope. Somewhere in the back of the hall, Victor watched, his heart finally at peace. For the first time in years, they were no longer strangers. They were family. If you've liked this story, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends.